Hey guys, this is Justin Richards, and today I will be walking you through. This is lesson 4, chapter 3, brief exercise 11. And sorry, I left my book at home or at work, and so I had to go old school. It's just writing out the problem. Luckily, I've got the book on my phone, but I'm also using that to record, so can't record my phone while it's recording. Anyway, so this problem is pretty straightforward as far as what you actually do, but the principles I think are what they're wanting us to kind of wrap our heads around. But problem is from the ledger balances below, prepare a trial balance for Peat Company at June 30, 2017, and then it mentions that all account balances are normal, and I'll kind of explain what that means later on. For now, these are the different accounts. We got accounts payable, cash, common stock, dividends, equipment, service revenue, accounts receivable, salaries and wages expenses, and rent expense. So, first, when you're preparing a trial balance, essentially you're taking all the accounts that are held by the company, all of their accounts, and you are determining which accounts are going to be debited and which accounts are credited, and the combination of debits and credits should equal. Now, this idea of debits and credits are kind of where that last little blurb comes into play. All account balances are normal, because an account balance, if it's normal, will either be credited or debited or credited. And this is an area where I definitely want to ask some questions on Thursday. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it, so that's kind of a bummer. But you guys need to ask Brother Mason so I can watch later more about debit and credit, because it's very unclear in the book. Essentially, it describes it as debits go on the left and credits go on the right, and kind of leaves it at that. I think it's kind of a little bit more advanced theory. It kind of gets a little hairy, but they tried to simplify it for us, which I'm grateful for. The next step after you've identified your accounts is to determine which order they'll go in. And there's a nice little helpful hint that the order of presentation for a trial balance goes assets, liabilities, stockholders' equity, revenues, and expenses. So what I did was just listed out all the assets, and I kind of just I gathered each account into those different categories. So assets, you've got cash, accounts receivable, and equipment. Then you've got your liabilities, which was your accounts payable. You got your stockholders' equity, which is your common stock, as well as dividends also go under stockholders' equity. Then you got your revenues, and lastly, you got expenses. So it's interesting. This actually, like the numbers, I mean, they're important. You always want to make sure that the numbers are accurate. But I think this practice, or this brief exercise, is more about the accounts and kind of the principles of it rather than the numbers. So next thing, after you've divided those into the different categories, you're going to want to determine what those accounts balances are when it's a normal balance. Sorry, going back to this last statement, all account balances are normal. So you want to determine when a cash account is a normal balance, is it going to be a debit or a credit? And it lists it out in the book. Each of these accounts, it'll tell you if it's a debit or a credit, and it explains why. It also explains that debits and credits are not an increase or decrease of money, as a lot of people commonly get mistaken. So yeah, so the fact that a cash account, when it's normally balanced as a debit, does not mean that it's positive cash or your cash is increasing. That's not what that means. It's simply stating, I think, is where that value is going. And in order for the trial balance sheet to balance, the accounts have been determined as debit or credit so that they will balance. And that's really what I hope to get more clarified on Thursday is the idea of debits and credits. So, because it definitely confused me. I don't know about you guys, but I was definitely confused. So, moving on to creating the trial balance sheet. The rest is pretty simple. You just kind of plug in what you've divided into this trial balance sheet. You start with the title. So you've got the company name first, Peat Company. Then you got the type of statement that it is, which is a trial balance statement, and you've got your date. And a trial balance statement will record the accounts for a specific period in time, not a point in time, not over a year or a month. It will determine like for one day up to that point. So you list out your accounts in the orders that we talked about, meaning this one over here, assets, liabilities, all that. And you don't include them, you just include the account names. So it's definitely important to have that order memorized: the assets, liabilities, stockholders' equity, revenues, and expenses, because that's how you're going to read the trial balance sheet. So once you go through, I just went through the book and tried to determine how the accounts were, if they were debited or credited, and I just wrote it next to each account. So cash is debited. It said that actually assets, no, this one was cash is debited, and then accounts receivable is debited, equipment is debited. I think it said liabilities. I would definitely check in the book again to make sure. It's got a nice little section where it kind of shows like a green arrow for up and a red arrow for down, and it'll say like if the account is normally debited or credited. So I would definitely refer to that. Determine for the accounts if they're debited or credited, and then for your trial balance sheet, write out all your accounts on the left side. On the right side, you're going to create two columns, debit and credit, and then simply put in if the account is debited, then put it on this side. If it's credited, put it on that side. And when you add it up, they should both be equal. That shows simply where your value is going. So I still don't think that I fully understand all the principles. I know how to create it, but that's definitely an area of opportunity for me, is to learn more about what debiting is, what crediting is, and besides simply like putting on the right and putting on the left. I was a little upset with that answer, but it might just be the way it is. I don't know. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Definitely feel free to ask questions. Please ask questions when whoever attends the meeting on Thursday. Again, I can't be there. I've got an institute class at that same time, but definitely ask those questions, and hopefully we can all get this figured out. So that's my tutorial.